you can chart all the various factions, including the Taliban, over the last 30 years, and you'll see that at every step of the way, when they had no other choice, they would switch sides. And the Taliban were no different because they were a defeated and spent force in 2001, 2002. So just to give an example of the types of people who had attempted to cut deals with the Afghan government. The Minister of Interior, the Taliban Minister of Interior, Taliban Minister of Defense, the Minister of Information, Minister of Justice, Minister of Foreign Affairs, Health, Commerce, Industry, members of Mullah Omar, who's a leader of the Taliban, Mullah Omar's inner shura, key frontline commanders, even some of the most ideological members of the Taliban. And one of my favorite examples is somebody named Mullah Tarabi. And he was a Minister of Justice for a time, and he was one of the people who really instituted the most draconian measures of the Taliban that we associate with the Taliban today. The sort of whip-wielding religious police that would go around and arrest people who didn't have long enough beards, etc. Even he tried to cut a deal with the American-backed government after 2001. Along with them, thousands of their sort of subordinates, their foot soldiers, also did the same. And so effectively, in 2002, the Taliban ceased to exist. And I went back and I looked at the incidents of violence in 2002 in Kandahar. And there was almost none. There's a few lone wolf attacks. Some of them could be chalked up to sort of tribal rivalries or whatever. If you talk to people who were in Kandahar at the time in 2002, you could travel anywhere in the province. Today, you can't do that so much. These settlements sort of existed across the board. And if those settlements had held, I think the history of the last 10 years would have been very different, but they didn't. And I think the reason was the Taliban, as a defeated and spent force, was ready to negotiate, but we, the US, as a victorious force, was not. And the elements of the Afghan government, such as the Northern Alliance, were not ready to negotiate. So just a couple of examples. So I mentioned Mullah Tarabi, who was the head of the religious, sort of Ministry of Justice and the whip-wielding religious police. Tarabi turned himself in to the governor of Kandahar in January 2002. And he cut a deal with the governor in which he said, I renounce all rights to partake in politics. I will live at home and I'll give you the right to surveil me and monitor that I'm staying at home, turn over all of my weapons, and agree to sort of live a political life. And so he did. But within a few days, the news leaked that he had surrendered to the Afghan government. And folks here in DC, particularly Donald Rumsfeld, but others, were very, very upset by this. And they, this was you have to remember the sort of the mood at the time, which is either with us or against us. And if you are against us, you're always against us. And it's a mark on your personality. It's not sort of a position that you're taking. And so the US government put immense pressure on the governor of Kandahar. And the governor of Kandahar reached out to Mullah Tarabi and said, look, I'm getting in a lot of hot water for allowing you to surrender and stay at home. You should leave. You should leave the country. And if you don't, we're going to have to arrest you and turn you over to the Americans. So Tarabi fled to Pakistan, where years later he sort of re-engaged with the other elements of the Taliban. Another example is Khairullah Khairkhwah. He was a one-time interior minister of Afghanistan and the Taliban, and also sort of very important political figure in the Taliban. And he has sort of tribal and kinship connections to President Karzai and Karzai's family. And so after the US invasion and after the fall of the Taliban, he was looking to sort of make a connection to Karzai and see if he could renounce his Taliban past and join the American-backed Afghan government. So he arranged a meeting with Ahmad Wali Karzai, the brother of Hamid Karzai, the president, in Pakistan. The Pakistanis caught wind of this meeting. They weren't happy for very different reasons, but they also weren't happy with Taliban who were reconciling. So they told the Americans that this is happening and told the Americans this guy shouldn't, he's a Taliban. So the Americans arrested him, caught him, arrested him, and sent him to Guantanamo, where he exists to this day. And this is the logic that existed at the time. It was the logic of the war on terror, in which there was no conception of reconciliation. All of these people, by the way, if they had come forward today, we would have welcomed them with open arms. What they were offering in 2002 is exactly what the US wants to happen with the Taliban today, which is renounce political life, sit at home, and support, morally or ethically or verbally or whatever, the Afghan government. right? And that was on offer in 2002.